This video is to go over the hand tool identification worksheet that I provided for my class. I want to start going over these tools one at a time. Let's start with number one. Number one is a tape measure. So a tape measure, simple tool, you guys have all seen it before. A couple things that you got to know about this tool for the test is that we never want to bend the tape measure back here at the hook. You can actually see there's a little indentation maybe right there in my tape ribbon. And that's because someone has bent this tool back really hard right there, right on the back of that line. And you don't want to keep doing that. That's going to break and damage the tape measure. These are over 20 bucks, so we want to take care of them. The other thing is we want to make sure we're never extending this thing way out over the top of where someone's standing, because if it falls like this and then hits them in the face, it could land in their eye. So we always want to make sure that everyone's clear if we're doing something like that, to point to something or to grab something with a tape measure. The number two is a tri-square. A tri-square is used to measure things like the outside of a corner, the inside of a corner, or even 45 degrees to a particular edge. There's a little angled fence right here that you can push up against the wood to measure about 45 degrees. That's the tri-square. The next one is a combination square. So our combination square does everything a tri-square will do, in addition to the fact that it will allow you to move the back of the square and set it to 2 inches or whatever dimension you need, and you can measure and mark a bunch of different things at that particular size that you need. A tri-square also has, a combination square, in addition to measuring inside, outside, and the 45 degrees, will allow you to level something small with this little spirit level. It's got a little thing right here, which is a scribe for scratching your mark on something. And it's got a little rod inside here that's threaded with this nut. And then when you push up on this, you can pull the ruler out and use this as an independent ruler. The top of this little rod inside is a little rod with a little hook on it. And that hook grabs onto this little groove right here. So if we push up on that and screw this back down nice and tight, that groove gets pulled down tight into the combination squares fence and everything's locked in place. The next one we have is a T-square, or a T-bevel. The T-bevel loosens up at the bottom. It allows it to rotate to whatever angle you're trying to match. Let's say you wanted to know what angle this was. We could swing this around here, get that leveled out till it's just right, and we could lock that into place. We know because this is 45 degrees that this is now set at 45 degrees. That's how the T-bevel works. Number 5 on your list is a simple ruler. The ruler is actually a very important tool in our wood shop. We use them for a lot of things, especially the darker colored rulers. The dark ruler is really handy because if you set it on a piece of wood and you're trying to figure out if it's flat, if you can see through it, if there's light shining through, then you know that the wood needs to be shaped more or worked on until it becomes flat. In order for us to do that with this tool, this edge has to be pristine, nice and flat. It'll stand up on its own. You set it on a board as we're checking it. So in order for that to work, we got to make sure we're not hitting this thing against the edge or doing anything that could cause damage to this particular ruler. So please be gentle with the rulers to make sure we don't do anything to hurt them. We do have a couple of rulers that have already seen some pretty harsh signs of wear and tear. This edge is pretty beat up already because someone has been beating this thing against the edge of something. They're not drumsticks, so please be nice to them. Our next one is a framing square. This is a framing square, and a framing square for a framer has a lot of really cool features to it. If you recall when we looked at tape measures, the tape measure has specific markings on it every 16 inches. So it's 16, 32, notice they're in red, 48, and so on, that allows us to lay out a standard 16 on center wall where every stud is 16 inches apart. This particular tool is exactly 16 in this direction. It's exactly 24 in this direction for a 24-inch layout. The tongue on this, the thickness of this, is 1.5 inches wide, which is great for marking a 2x4 thickness. This particular tongue is 2 inches, which is also very handy. And there's a whole bunch of information on here to help you lay stuff out. Very good tool for setting up stairs and stuff as well. So that's a great tool for a woodworker or a carpenter. The next tool is a Western style handsaw. The handsaws have two different variations within our shop. These are the handsaws, and if you can see really close, I'll try and get close to the blade, or close to this camera lens, you guys can see that there's large teeth and then there's small teeth like this one. There is a difference between these two, and I'll help you remember it by thinking about a tree. So if you have a tree standing, as the tree stands up, the tree is biggest in its tall position, it's smaller in its width, right? So the big teeth would be to cut in the big direction, or the length of the tree. The small teeth are used to cut in the smaller direction, or across the grain, like as if you were to cut a tree down. Now, there's another tool we have that's really cool that does both of those things, and that's this Japanese handsaw. The difference is on the Japanese saw, instead of the teeth pointing forward, these teeth are all pointed back towards the handle. There's big teeth and there's little teeth. What that allows us to do with this tool is we pull the bind out instead of pushing the bind in as we cut. So instead of this thing wanting to do this, we pull when we want pressure on the teeth, and we pull that bind out. That's pretty neat for this Japanese design saw. Okay, let's take a look at number 8. Number 8 is a reinforced spine on a back saw. So this is a back saw. This particular back saw here has this nice stiff reinforced back or spine, and this would help you cut nice and straight cuts, especially if you're using something like a miter box. A variation of a miter box, or a box that helps you get everything nice and accurate, would be number 10. We'll look at that in just a second. Number 9. Number 9 is a coping saw. The coping saw is great for cutting really tight curves, steep angles, and it can be loosened up and adjusted by holding onto this wing with your hand. You loosen this a little bit, push these wings out together. You always do them at the same time so you don't twist the blade because you don't want to break it. And then when you get the angle to wherever you want it to be, so that your saw can approach at the right angle so that it clears the wood, you tighten it up. So in this case, we're just going to put it back to 0, or even, where this wing is even with the actual saw itself, and tighten it back up so there's tension on the blade. Okay, number 10, like we said, that's a miter box. Here we have, this is our number 10, and that would allow you to adjust the cut for 90 degrees, 45 in either direction, and depending on the miter box you have, it might do some fancier things. Number 11 is a keyhole saw. The keyhole saw is not one we really use in shop, but that's this really sharp pointed saw. Instead of using keyhole saws, in my construction class we have something that looks similar but it's totally different, because this is much stiffer with larger teeth, and that's a drywall saw. Different than a keyhole saw. That would be used for cutting out the little square part where an electrical box goes in drywall. Okay, number 12 would be a marking gauge. We have several different styles of marking gauges, but this is a marking gauge. It is a fence that has a screw in it to clamp it onto a center shaft of some sort. And that shaft in this particular instance has numbers on it, or like a ruler, so you can measure from the scribing point